Look at that, I'm headless. Does that work a little bit better? Maybe, kind of, I have no idea. I've never done this before, can you tell? I don't generally do live. Well, I do live when I'm speaking, that's for sure. So what the hell am I doing right now? This is really weird and slightly disorienting. Well, I'm procrastinating furiously about about a speech, about a presentation that I'm going to be giving in about a week or so. Yeah, I'm a little less than a week out of a presentation. And essentially what I'm doing right now is doing my signature combination of development and practice of a speech at the same time. Anyone who's worked with me, you will have heard my philosophy on how to develop content for a presentation, for a keynote, for a speech, for a workshop, whatever. And that is that you want to do the development of the content out loud. If you only ever do it in your head, then you actually don't figure out what the words really sound like, really feel like, what their cadence is, what their timing is when it comes time to get them out of your mouth and send them out into the world, so to speak. So I often make a comment of how messy this process is and just how flipping messy it is to actually develop a talk. And very frequently people are nervous when I say you got to get up, you got to talk through this stuff out loud, you have to improvise it, you have to screw up, you try something out, rinse, wash, repeat, and they say, you know, Lauren, I gave it a try, but what came out of my mouth sounded so awful that I just couldn't even stand hearing myself talk. And to be perfectly honest, yes, that is true. That is the process of creating a speech. You figure out how to do a cartwheel by landing on your head a million times before your body finally just does it. You figure out the content of your talk by, you know, creating horrible first drafts and running through it and making mistake after mistake after mistake while you're actually sussing out that content, while you're figuring out what it is you want to say. And if you want to get really good at giving talks without needing to rely on notes, without needing to read off of a script, because my God, that is an absolute killer. Reading off of a script is a killer in terms of connecting with your audience. Then you need to practice doing disciplined improvisation out loud around the thing it is that you want to talk about. You have to basically practice thinking out loud. And yeah, it's awkward. It's brutally awkward. It's kind of embarrassing. To be honest, I feel embarrassed and aggravated every time I go through this process. But I also wanted to show you that, yes, even professional speakers go through the embarrassing, awkward, 90% of what I say is going to be BS practice periods when developing our content. So I thought, okay, I will invite you to come along with me on this little ride and sit in on one of my own practice and content development sessions. Right. New whole potentially. This is the first time I've done a YouTube live, by the way. And I'm just going to invite people from my speakers group to join. Let's hop over to Caps here for just a moment. For the all of nobody who's joined me so far, please forgive me for this moderate delay. Hey guys, I'm doing a YouTube live stream. Okay. So I know that you out there can't see what I'm looking at right now, but what I have here is my office set up. I've got, I use a mind mapping method of developing my content that I call the information ladder. There's one of my information ladders. I've got that out here just on the table so that I can refer to it. I've got everything organized and some additional speaking notes on my on my whiteboard, which is just over there. And I've got my my presentation slide deck as it currently is. I'm sure as I go through this, I'll change the slide deck. But I've got that slide deck up on my computer right now on a dual monitor computer so that I can practice this with a little bit of a feel of how the presentation is going to come along. Now, this isn't the first time I've given a presentation similar to the one that I'm giving right now. This is a topic that I speak about every now and then. But to be honest, every time I give a presentation, I end up tweaking it. I make it a bit better. I change things around. I try to improve it. So you will see me making a lot of mistakes today. Ooh la la. So more setup. Here's my remote presenter. I love my remote presenter. Okay, let's pop this sucker up. Slideshow from beginning. And yay, it is giving me the notes view. I don't always use notes view on PowerPoint when I'm actually doing a presentation, but it is really, really helpful to use notes view when I'm practicing because I can see the slide that's coming up and I can see whatever notes I've added here. Now, I will tell you right now, the introduction to this is super, super, super rough. I haven't cinched it up yet, so you're going to see a lot of garbage. You're going to hear a lot of garbage coming out of my mouth. And I'll be pounding back a lot of water too. Okay. So we've, see, it already begins. Expect a lot of swearing as well. I swear to myself like crazy whenever I'm practicing. Has anyone here come across that sort of individual, that leader in their life, when as soon as they walk into the room, you look at them and you think, oh yeah, that person has it, you know, whatever it might be. They've got the look, they've got the suit. Yeah, so I'm seeing some nodding heads. That's really good. Every one of us has encountered that sort of leader that just exudes confidence and charisma. They have executive presence. I don't really like that intro, but yeah, that's fine. So who here has encountered that sort of leader? Maybe it's an executive, a manager, a CEO, a boss, someone you've seen on TV who you wish was your boss. That person who just walks into the room and as soon as you see them, you say, oh yeah, they've got it. That's the kind of leader that I want to follow. Yeah? I'm seeing some nodding heads around here. Yeah. Every one of us, I'm sure at some point, has encountered that that professional that just makes us feel like, yeah, they've got it. They know who they are. They know what they're doing here. They're in control. This sense of, oh yeah, that's a person I want to follow. That's someone I trust. That's someone who should be in a position of responsibility or a position of power is very commonly called executive presence. Now, executive presence itself, okay, that trait is very commonly called executive presence. And it's something that being a, no, I don't want to get into that. That trait's commonly called executive presence. A lot of people look for that executive presence holy grail. What is it that I can do to give myself, what is it that I can do to give people a sense of my charisma, to get them to pay attention to me, to listen to what I'm saying? You know, how can I make people look at me when I walk into a room and when I speak, they're quiet and people listen? People with good executive presence, they really do carry themselves with a nice combination of dignity and energy and intelligence that combines with other really intangible characteristics, which leaves people saying, oh, they know how to handle themselves. They deserve to be in the position that they're in. Unfortunately, what executive presence is made up of is really, really hard to define. It is devilishly hard to define, actually, but it's a pretty important characteristic that we want to wrap our heads around. Because if we spend time figuring out what it means to look and behave like a leader, our potential for attaining leadership positions within our career, or even from being able to, even for being able to do that, even being able to do that wonderful activity of leading from within or leading from any position, really does go up when we're able to master that presence that makes people sit up and pay attention. Your ability to lead a room can have significant impact on your career, regardless what level you're currently in, regardless what level you might currently have in that career. And one of the interesting quirks about executive presence is that you don't need to be an executive. This isn't titled executive presence, though, so I don't know if I want to go on using that term. What the hell, we'll go for it. One of the interesting quirks about executive presence, about leadership presence, is that you don't technically need to be an executive or even necessarily a leader in order to develop and wield it. I actually recommend that your presence, figuring out what your presence is, working on it, refining it, establishing your charisma, and figuring out how to display that to the world is a critical thing to learn early in your career. Don't leave this until later, until you have a job title that you feel merits the development of presence. Do it early in your career so that by the time you attain those higher level positions, you've already got it. That feels conclusion-y to me, not introduction-y. Yeah, this introduction is really rough. Okay, so I'm going to start back from the beginning. I do a lot of stopping and starting whenever I'm doing this. Okay. Who here has ever encountered that leader that, who here has ever had a manager or been in the presence, let's say, of a high-level leader that as soon as they walk into the room, bam, everyone looks at them. Everyone listens to them. You can tell that the attention of the entire group that's gathered just swivels over and zeroes in on that one person in the room. They take over everyone's field of attention. Yeah? Yeah, I'm seeing some nodding heads around here, right? This is sometimes defined as being a charismatic leader. Now, right? What do you call that? Charisma. Yeah, that's a big one. Charisma is something that I hear quite often. Leadership. Yeah. Presence. There we go. You call it the thing that we're all here to talk about. That's terrible. So who here has ever encountered one of those professional, who here's ever encountered one of those people that as soon as they walk into the room, maybe it was a manager that you had, a supervisor, someone in a high position in the organization you were part of or the company that you worked for, but there was this person that whenever they walked into the room, people stopped and looked and listened for whatever it was they were going to say. I'm seeing some nodding heads around here. Yeah. I'm curious, do you work for that person right now? It's okay. This is a safe space you can share. Yeah. So maybe you worked for them. Maybe it was someone from another organization that you just really admired. It could be one of those leader celebrities, like the famous Richard Branson or I don't know, fill in your celebrity executive of preference, fill in the blank. But we've all seen those people who are able to arrest the attention of a room as soon as they walk into it. Now, this magical ability has a couple of different words for it. A common one is charisma. You've heard of very charismatic leaders, people who can really command others' attention. But the term that I generally hear used in professional circles is presence, especially executive presence or leadership presence. Executive presence is devilishly hard to define. It's very difficult to pin down exactly what it is because it's a combination of traits. There's something about it, about the person, maybe the way they carry themselves or the way they speak, that immediately commands either respect or at the very least commands attention. And pinpointing those characteristics is somewhat difficult because the traits of what someone considers charisma, the pieces of what someone might consider charismatic is going to change from person to person. There's an element of individual preference and individual style here. See, part of what I'm doing right now is I'm also trying to get a feel for how long I'm spending on each one of these segments. And usually my introductions, unless I really cinch them down, I've given myself 5 minutes to time out this introduction. And unless I cinch them down very carefully, I find it really easy to go overtime on the introductions. And I can tell you right now, I'm already going to go over time on this one because I am not organized enough. But that's why we practice, folks. And that's why we do it out loud. So I've got a timer out. I do actually keep timers while I do this. Except the wretched thing keeps timing out. Ha ha ha. There we go. Okay. Who here in this room has Who here today has ever been in a room, you know, during work, at a conference, something like that, some professional event, where as soon as an individual, a particular individual, likely someone who has a position of power, as soon as this person walks into the room, everyone else stops and looks at them and pays attention. You know, that moment where they've arrived and you can kind of hear a pin drop. I'm seeing some nodding heads. Yeah. Out of curiosity, was this someone that you worked for, or was it a leader from another organization or one that you never had contact with? It was someone you worked for. That's really cool. For other people here, for you, was it someone you worked for, or a celebrity that you saw on TV? Celebrity, yeah. Who? Steve Jobs. Yes, we hear he was one of the famously charismatic people. Well, that ability to walk in, that characteristic of walking into a room and suddenly commanding attention by the mere aspect of that ability to just walk into a room and immediately arrest people's attention can sometimes be called charisma, but very often in professional circles is referred to as presence. In particular, executive presence. Someone exudes the aura of an individual who should be in charge, who should be taking the helm of the ship, who should be leading a group. It's something that most people can identify when they see it, but can't necessarily define on their own. If you said, what makes up executive presence? What gives someone the presence of a leader? It can be really, really hard to pinpoint definition, that sort of thing. But it's actually, even though it's hard to assign a precise definition to presence, it's something that you want to be able to wrap your head around, and ideally wrap your head around fairly early in your career. And that's because an individual's presence, their charisma, their ability to command people's attention can have a very, very real impact on their career trajectory and on their efficiency and effectiveness as a leader. Excuse me. On their efficiency and their effectiveness as a leader. Now, one of the quirks, one of the interesting things about executive presence is that you don't need to be an executive in order to wield it. You don't even need an official position of leadership in order to develop and use presence and charisma to your advantage. This is where the notion of developing, you don't even need to be an executive or be in an official leadership position in order to develop good presence and then use it to your advantage. I believe very firmly that developing presence that crafting charisma, that having that figuring out how to command people's attention actually should be developed very early in your career, in the stages of your career that many people in this room are currently in. You're working professionals, you've been in the field for a few years, you might be starting to rise up through the ranks, but you're certainly, well, maybe with a couple of exceptions in this room, certainly not at that executive level yet. This is something that you want to start practicing right now. And that is because when you develop that presence, your ability to take charge of situations and to be noticed as a leader goes way up. So it can very effectively, it can have a very, very positive impact on your career path and help you rise through the ranks much faster. It's also going to help you do your job a lot better, particularly if you work within a team of people and you find yourself taking any kind of role, any kind of position of responsibility. See, I'm already at 30 seconds down to 5 minutes. It's going on too long. Okay, you know what? Pause. I'm going to move past the introduction right now. I need to spend more time really sussing out that introduction. I think I actually need to spend more time writing a bit out. And that's one of the things that I do when I am practicing and developing content, is that I will flip in between improvising out loud, which is what you're seeing me do right now, and actually writing things down, kind of getting my brain going in the written word. And then as soon as something's working for me, stepping back and yammering out loud, getting into the spoken word as quickly as possible. This introduction bit isn't working for me yet. I need to modify it from the other presence-related talk that I've given here. I need to modify it and get it away from the previous talk that I was giving, which was to a different group of people. So this doesn't mean that the last, 10, 15 minutes has gone to waste. It just means that I need to work on this segment of my talk a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is actually see all of those slides that I would have otherwise needed to get through. What I'm actually going to do now is flip forward to a different section in my talk. And, it's totally fine to bounce back and forth between different sections of your talk when you're working on them. That's totally normal. It's one thing I wouldn't recommend doing is trying to create your talk from beginning to end the whole way through, or even honestly trying to practice it beginning to end the whole way through, because it's just too much. You don't write a novel in one big fell swoop. You don't create a talk in one big fell swoop either. So I'm moving forward to a point that I'm feeling a little bit better about. And that's my first talking point, which I have changed slightly. So, okay, let's go from here. Oh, why are you being strange, Mr. Double Screen? Oh, there we go. That's why. Okay. All right. Now, very few people out there want to feel like they are under a microscope like this. Some of you might be thinking, you know what, Lauren, I don't want to have to worry about how I carry myself, what my voice sounds like, how I dress, my deportment, all of that really fussy, stuffy stuff. Stuffy stuff, that's terrible. I don't necessarily want to put myself under a microscope where I'm picking apart all of the different aspects of my personality. Like, shouldn't my work stand for itself? Yes, your work should stand for itself. Your ideas are important. The quality of your output matters a great deal. But when you look at your presence, at your charisma, at that feeling, when you look at your charisma, at your overall presence as one more tool in your box that you can pull out and use to help get things done, to help make your job easier, to help make your career better, what you're actually doing is, I've already used the tool in the toolbox metaphor. But when you look at presence not as some sort of show that you're putting on, not as some sort of mask that you're trying to wear, but rather as a legitimate tool that you can use to make your work more effective, make your day more efficient, even more enjoyable, and to definitely help you in the advancement of your career. You're going to realize that it's less about putting yourself under the microscope and more. This technically is still part of the introduction, but it's a part that I want to keep. Okay, now, wow. So you might be cringing at the thought, at the notion right now of putting yourself under a microscope like this. And I completely sympathize with that. Because, I mean, after all, isn't our work what's important? Shouldn't our output, our results be what people are paying attention to, what matters? Well, yes, it is very important. Of course, I want you to have good results in your work. Of course, I want you to do a good job and have good output. But to ignore this human aspect of interaction, this human aspect of interpersonal work communication is not actually going to do you any favors. And it's not that, it's not going, oh, that's really negative. So some of you might be cringing right now at this idea of putting yourself under the microscope in this way. And I completely sympathize with you. I mean, it can be tiring to be worried about how you're holding yourself up, what your posture is like, what your voice is like, if you are charismatic enough for the people that you're talking to. You know, it's the quality of your work that matters, right? It seems like we should not have to use up our limited time and energy worrying about our charisma or about our presence. But you could look at this a completely different way. Developing your presence gives you a huge leg up in terms of how you communicate with others and how effective your workplace communication is. It can help give our words and our ideas greater strength, more impact. It can help us positively influence people to perceive us and our ideas more favorably, even before we open our mouths. I'm not talking about bald-faced manipulation here. You know, your ideas need to be good. I do not want you using presence to push forward terrible ideas. But if you've got a good idea, one that you believe in, or if you have that proverbial hill that you're going to die on, wouldn't it be worth your time to be able to improve your argument? Oh, getting convoluted. Developing your presence is going to give you a huge leg up in terms of how you communicate and interact with others. It has a very powerful subconscious effect and can help you make your ideas and your arguments more convincing and more palatable even before you open your mouth, even before you give all of your evidence, even before you come to your conclusion. And that's something that's worth paying attention to, no? That would be a really powerful tool to put into your toolbox. Now, what prevents a lot of people from engaging with the notion of presence is that they see it as being something magical, right? You've got it, or you don't. You're charismatic, or you're not. You've got the gift of the gab, or you talk like a complete idiot, so on and so on. Reality, though, I sound like my dad whenever I say that. You know, now what I find prevents a lot of people from engaging, what I find prevents a lot of people from really spending time consciously working on their presence is that they think that it's something that you've either got or you don't. You've got presence or you don't. You're either really charismatic naturally, you're born that way, or you're just an average Joe, right? But that isn't true. And that's the exciting thing about presence. It is not a magical inborn trait. It is something that is strategically planned, that is crafted, that is created, and that's practiced in order to give someone more prowess in their nonverbal communication. Presence is something that you develop and you cultivate, not necessarily something that you're born with. So where does this strategy, where does this practice come in? It comes in when you're figuring out what kind of nonverbal or we could even consider it non-informational, non-data related signals. Um, so where does the strategy of presence come in? It comes into you figuring out what sort of signals you need to send to help get your message across, especially what sort of nonverbal signals you need to send. Ultimately, my definition of presence is that it's social signaling that is used by leaders to command attention and encourage followership. Pay attention to that. It is social signaling. These are signals that you can learn, that you can plan, and that you can practice until they appear completely natural. Now, people are always watching you. I know that's scary. Many of you go, no, that's the problem. I don't like it when people watch me. But it's a fact of life, right? If you're out in human society, people are going to be watching you. And they're going to be paying attention to different aspects of your behavior and your personality that will give them indications of what you're like, of what your character is like, of how you might respond under stress or under pressure. Of how you might respond under stress or under pressure. They are very much watching you. And they're looking for a few key things, even if they don't realize it. People are reading. Whenever you're within a group of people, whenever you're out in society, whether it's work or not, sound like a Regency era novel. Oh, your daughter's out in society yet? Okay, what time have we got here? It's almost supper. I'm getting hungry. Whenever we're out among a group of people, work, whenever we're out with people, we are being read, we're being evaluated, we're being judged. I know that sounds scary, right? Many of you are going, oh no, I hate that. I am afraid of people judging me. Don't tell me that that's what's going on here, Lauren. But it's true. It's true. We are a social species and we're always evaluating people's behavior so that we can effectively know them better, understand them better, predict what their behavior might be when they're under stress or when they're feeling off-footed. You know, is this person, oh, I can't use a happy drunk or a sad drunk thing here. So don't you learn, Lauren? Whenever we're out with a group of people, people are reading us. They're reading our behavior. They're looking for certain tells, certain signs or certain signals that indicate how our brains work, what we are like when we're under pressure or under stress, whether or not they feel, whether or not they perceive us as being trustworthy or, up to no good. Whenever we're out with people, whenever we're in a group of people, we're being read in some way, and we are reading others at that same time. We're a social species. This is how we work. We're always looking at people's behavior, looking at their different signals, different characteristics, to kind of get inside their heads, to figure out what they're like as a person. And there's certain things that, for leaders, we're always looking at people's signals to figure out what they're like. Who are they as a person? What are they going to be like under stress? Can I count on them? Can I trust them? Can I believe them? Do I want to follow them? And when we're looking at people who we perceive as leaders or who we believe are in certain positions of power, there's specific things that we are reading into their whole presence. We're looking for admirable traits that are going to make us want to fall in line behind them, that are going to make us say, yes, I believe in what you're doing. I think that you're going to lead us the right way. I am happy to follow you. That's what I mean by encouraging followership. You want to make people feel that, yes, you are someone that they can follow, that they can trust, and whose ideas they do want to act on. I'm babbling a bit here, but that's okay. Transitional points are always tricky. I'm pondering. I'm looking at my notes right now. I'm pondering where I want to go with this. And actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm not going to ponder. I am going to time myself. It's time to put some firm boundaries along how quickly I need to make this transition point. Whoops. That's why I have a rubber case. Okay. So according to my timing, because I also plan out all of my timing very carefully whenever I'm creating a presentation, I actually only have 1 minute to make this particular transition work. So whenever we're in a group of people, we are reading others and others are reading us. They're looking for specific characteristics, different traits, different behaviors that is going to give them an idea of how we might behave or respond in certain situations. You know, how does this person that I'm meeting or that I'm listening to, how are they going to respond under stress? Are they going to be okay with disagreement, or are they going to bite my head off if I say that I have a different view from them? Are they going to be the sort of person who will bolster me up if I need help, or are they going to throw me under the bus? These are characteristics that people read into us based off of our overall behavior. And there are specific traits that I have found we watch for within leaders, very specific things that we especially like to see in an executive, in a leader, and that we look for in their overall presence. Boom! That was 1 minute. Ha! Okay. That's why I love using timers. Puts you under the gun. Okay. One of those characteristics is control. I don't mean control of other people, I mean self-control. The ability to rein in your emotions and I'm referring to self-control. The ability to rein in your emotions, to manage your impulses, and to dole out the right kind of feeling or the right kind of expression at the right time. There's a bit of timing here. And leaders with really, really good presence are usually able to figure out when they need to show a certain emotion and when they need to hold other emotions back. That is that self-control. So they'll come into a room and they'll say, you know what, right now what these people need is they need someone to stand strong for them. They've just received some bad news. I need to seem calm. I need to seem firm. I need to seem resolved. And they give off that emotion. That takes control. Or they see a group of people that maybe need a bit of motivation. So they say, okay, well, right now, you know what? I might be tired. I might be bored by these whole proceedings, but they need a cheerleader. They need to see a bit of passion from me so that they can feel that in turn. So the leader gives them that passion. That's another kind of control. Or they might say what these people need is a smack upside the head. Maybe they need to see a bit of, woof, that's aggressive. Maybe what these people need is a bit of smack upside the head. Maybe they need to see me reining in my feelings so that I'm demonstrating to them just how much control I have over my emotions. It's not about, self-control isn't about being emotionless. It's about being able to give the right emotion at the right time. This part's too long. Cancel. Let's start that again. One of the traits that people are looking for in their leaders is control. Not control of others, control of themselves, internal self-control. Can you demonstrate that you are able to master your emotions so that when the going gets tough, so to speak, or that when things are very tense, very charged, you're able to keep a clear head and you're able to hold your emotions in check. You don't have tantrums, let's say. Executive tantrums are never a good thing, no matter what you might see in the movies. Or do you have the sort of control that allows you to show a bit of your passion for the work that you do when it really matters, to give people a boost, to show them some energy when they could use that boost? That's the kind of control that people look for in their executives. Do they demonstrate the right emotion at the right time so that things go the way they want, ideally without browbeating anybody in the room. Now, the sort of control that you have to give is going to vary throughout your career. One thing to note is that women and people of color usually have a higher bar in terms of control that we're expected to reach, rather than the stereotypical white male in a very high powered position. That's simply our societal conditioning right now. It's unfortunate, but I do believe that that's improving. We can't get away with as much as others might be able to in terms of self-control. Now, for everyone in this room who is early in their career, what I've found is that the younger, I shouldn't say what I've found. For everyone here who's fairly early, pause that for a minute. For people here who are fairly early in their career, one thing that you will need to demonstrate is a greater control over how do I want to put this? Okay, let's go 1 minute. Give myself 1 minute for this chunk. The sort of control, the sort of self-control and, let's say, emotional range that you can express throughout your career is going to change. Now, overall, women and people of color are expected to demonstrate more self-control. We have a higher bar of expectations set for us. Do I want to get into this? It's kind of an elephant in the room, isn't it? Don't want to get into that at all. It was really important for the last time I gave this talk, but right now the focus needs to be on the young professionals. Okay, so you know what? I'm not going to get into that part because this audience is focused on young professionals, early career engineers. So I won't worry too much about that. Okay. The amount of self-control that you're going to need to demonstrate, the amount of self-control that you'll be expected to demonstrate throughout your career will change. Typically, people who have attained a high position or who hold a lot of power or who have a lot of seniority have more latitude in terms of how much emotion they express. Whereas people lower down on the ladder or simply earlier in their career need to be able to demonstrate a greater amount of control, a greater amount of emotional control. For everyone here who's early in their career, you want to be, for everyone here who's early in your career, you want to be able to be unflappable. Not that you don't care about feedback. You do want to demonstrate that you take feedback to heart, that you care deeply about what it is you do. But effectively, when things get rocky, when things get rough, you don't want to fall into the trap of blustering or throwing tantrums or showing that you can somehow lose control very, very easily. Early in your career, this is the kind of self-possession. You want to be very self-possessed. This is one of the leadership traits. It's so distracting. Okay, let's start that one over. See, I'm onto something. It's working for me now, but it's a matter of polishing and finessing it. The degree of emotional control that you'll be expected to exert is going to change throughout your career. People with a lot of seniority, who have been around for a long time, who have attained those high positions of leadership, are able to, they have more latitude to express a bit more emotion than they otherwise would be able to. They have a lot of power, so they can be a little more loose in their expressions and still be seen as behaving appropriately. But early in your career, you want to give off, but early in your career, people look to see whether or not you're easily rattled by setbacks. So you want to be able to demonstrate that when things get difficult, you don't get flustered, that you're basically unflappable, that you can stay calm and keep a cool head regardless of what's going on around you. Now, again, this doesn't mean that you have to be an emotional robot at work, and I definitely don't recommend that. We don't like robot leaders, but it does matter that you're able to demonstrate the right amount of expression, the right amount of emoting at the right time. Okay, I'm happy enough with that, so I'll carry on. I'll polish it more later. The next trait that we're looking at is the next leadership trait that people are really looking for in terms of the next leadership. Water. Like I said, lots of stopping and starting. Oh, hi, David. Thank you for joining. I'm gonna have to go up for supper pretty soon here. I've got karate tonight, so as much as I'm in a bit of a flow, I might flip on the practice camera again later on tonight and keep going with this because I really do need to crank it out. Okay. The next trait that we are typically looking for within presence is that of certainty. Do people give off a vibe that they're certain in what it is that they're certain about what it is they're doing? Do they have a firmness in their ideas? Do they show some robustness in their beliefs? And do they behave decisively? Decisive behavior is very, very important for leaders. It is a critical leadership trait, as indecisiveness tends to lead to confusion. It leads to people not being certain about what should be done next, and it definitely leads to a lack of decision making. So the certainty notion, it's basically the opposite of meekness or hesitancy. You don't need to be completely firm in all of your opinions to the point where you're rigid, to the point where people get the notion. Sorry, you don't want to be stiff in your ideas to the point where people get the impression that you are never going to break. That doesn't work. We don't want leaders to break either. Cancel start. So cancel start, what I'm doing is I'm just dialing it back to my previous 2 minutes. Another key leadership trait that we pick up in people's presence, that people are able to give off, is a feeling of certainty. Is the person who is taking the helm decisive? Do they believe in their decisions, or do they waffle on them? Very few people actually like waffling leaders. That's no good, because when the leader waffles, when our executives seem unsure about what to do next, it trickles out into the rest of the people around them. It trickles out into their teammates, into their workers, and then everyone feels uncertain about the current course of action. So this decisiveness is an absolutely critical leadership trait. Decisiveness is what assures people that action will be taken, that decisions will be made, that we're going to go forward. It's the opposite of weakness. Good Lord, that sounds awful. It's the opposite of meekness and hesitancy. It's the opposite of meekness. It's the opposite of hesitancy. What it's not is inflexibility or arrogance. That is very, very different. What it's not is inflexibility or arrogance. No, I think I just want to stick with inflexibility because I'm talking about confidence next. What it's not is inflexibility. If you're certain in your ideas and you do have, what it is not is inflexibility. Someone who gives off that feeling of certainty is still able and willing to listen to reason and to change their mind if compelling evidence comes up. But when it comes down, when the rubber hits the road and we need someone to make a decision, people typically look to the most certain person in the room, provided their ideas are, I'm all over the place here. One of the traits that we very much look for, I gotta go up and eat, shoot. We're already at 45 minutes. That is how fast time can fly by when you're practicing. Good living Lord. Okay, I'm just gonna get through the next 2 points. So I'll give myself, it's 2 + 2 minutes, so I'll give myself 4 minutes here. I'll get through the next 2 points, no stopping. Even though it's going to sound like garbage, no stopping. I'm just boom, going for it. Okay. The next key trait that we read into people's executive presence, the next key trait that we read into people's presence is whether or not they express certainty. Certainty is a critical leadership trait. We need our leaders to be able to hold firm to their ideas, even in the face of disagreement or dispute, and we need them to be able to make decisions. Very few people actually like making decisions. Making decisions means that you put on the mantle of responsibility. Making decisions mean that you take responsibility for what's going to happen next. So certainty and decisiveness can be one of those traits that even people being decisive, making decisions, and holding firm to your ideas also means taking responsibility for their consequences. And we need leaders, we want executives who demonstrate that they're willing to take that responsibility, that they're willing to take on the risk of being wrong so that decisions can be made and people can move forward with their actions, that we can go on and take the next step. This is the opposite of hesitancy. Now, what this does not mean is that you want to appear inflexible. Being certain is not the same thing as being inflexible at all. Even someone who typically acts with a great deal of decisiveness will still be willing to change their minds or adjust their course of action if they're given reasonable and compelling evidence that they should do that. So please don't mistake certainty for obtuseness. Obstinacy, that's one. So please don't confuse certainty with obstinacy. They're two very different things. The last trait that we're looking for is confidence. And you can see that all three of these traits, control, certainty, and confidence, they're very, very closely related. Confidence, again, is different from arrogance. It's a belief in your abilities, a comfort in, it's a belief in your abilities, a sense of self-assurance that yes, you are capable of doing this work, you are capable of leading this group, but also the ability to receive feedback and criticism and act productively on it. An insecure leader, and usually leaders with very poor presence, they will get very frosty, they'll get very combative. If you try to give feedback, they'll bite your head off. If you try to give them feedback, they'll lash out at you or bite your head off. Don't disagree with what I'm saying. That actually is a signifier of insecurity. Secure leaders, that's actually a signifier of insecurity, of a lack of confidence. Confident leaders, that's a signifier of a lack of confidence. Confident leaders feel comfortable. When we see them, we can tell that they're comfortable with ourselves, and they're also able to make other people comfortable being around them. They're not shrinking, they don't back away from opposition, but by the same token, they don't actively fight against it either. They're comfortable where they are, they're comfortable with who and what they are, and they're willing to stand in there. Oh, this is really rambly. I need to shorten certainty and confidence. So I pick my teeth, sorry. There's nothing dignified about this process. Okay, I need to shorten down both certainty and confidence. Okay, let me do confidence in 1 minute. Oh, dismiss. I've got too many timers. Okay, there we go. The last trait that people are looking for when they're reading into that executive presence is confidence. It's a sense that the executive or the leader believes in his or her abilities, is willing to stand by them, is comfortable taking on responsibility and positions of power, which are positions of responsibility, of course, but is also comfortable with the notion of receiving feedback and but is also comfortable with receiving feedback, with receiving criticism, and then acting on it. A confident leader doesn't start sniping or biting at people who disagree with them. They'll listen to the disagreement, and much like with certainty, if it has merit, They might adjust their course of action, but they don't feel badly about themselves for doing this. It's all part of the learning curve, right? You grow, you learn, your abilities become even greater. And occasionally receiving some disagreement is not something that's going to shake or rattle their confidence in themselves. Now, these three traits, control, certainty, confidence, these are perceived very quickly. We tend to make snap judgments as to whether or not someone has these characteristics, largely based off of the nonverbal signals that they give. Hence, the importance of an overall presence. So now these traits, the control, certainty, confidence, these are usually perceived very, very quickly. Within a few minutes of meeting someone, we've made up their minds as to whether they are self-assured, or whether they are maybe insecure in their position of power, or if they're a waffler, or if they really stand by their ideas. We come to these conclusions very quickly. We also typically come to our initial conclusion, our initial impression, subconsciously. It's not something that we've actively thought about or evaluated upon first meeting someone. And the signals that create it are also very subconscious. They're typically nonverbal signals. We don't have, these traits are usually perceived very quickly and quite subconsciously too. We evaluate someone's confidence or their self-control within the matter of minutes, within a few minutes of meeting them. It's not something that we process through rationalization. It's something that we observe largely through their nonverbal behavior and then make a fairly quick snap judgment about it. It's something that we read into people's presence without even realizing we're doing it. That is why it is so important to cultivate your presence, to cultivate your presence thoughtfully and with strategy. So what aspects of your presence are we? So what are those? Not what aspects, we just went through the aspects. And so this is something, so your presence, so it really is important that you cultivate your presence strategically, with purpose, with intention, and with care. Let's now look at those specific nonverbal signals that people are reading. And then we get the transition into the second talking point. Okay, so as you can see, that was a hot mess. But to be honest, it's always a hot mess at this stage. It's going to be a hot mess for a while yet. Hello, people. There we go. It's always a hot mess at this stage. It's going to be a hot mess for a little while yet. I need to go eat and then head to karate right away. But I'm going to be coming back to this later tonight. Maybe I'll pop on the camera. I haven't quite decided yet. But if you're ever working on a presentation and you feel like it just doesn't sound any good, well, you're right, it probably doesn't yet. But the more you talk through it, the more you practice this way. You have to practice out loud. You have to improvise it. Otherwise, you're going to end up being married to your notes, married to a script. The more of this process you do, the smoother and smoother and smoother it gets. And keep in mind, every time you go through this mess, you've practiced your speech one more time. You're one step closer to giving a really good talk that's going to serve your audience, that's going to make you feel great, quite frankly. And that really will be helpful and valuable to the people who are listening to you. So thank you very much for joining me. Like I said, I might be back on doing this again later on tonight, but not until late. You know, karate ends at around 8:30 p.m. my time, so probably not for another 4 or 5 hours. And I'm going to keep on practicing. See you later, everyone.